space. Well, not really. Take two. Here, in the Mitten State. Welcome to Code 47, bringing you all things Star Trek, spanning the quadrants, the best thing since the neutral zone. With your co-captains, Charlie Carden and Alex Terry.
My goodness, we are back again, friends. This is the Code 47 podcast over on the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. I am your humble servant, Trek Lord of West Michigan, captain of the USS Grand Petoskey in Starfleet International, Charlie Carden, joined as always by my soulmate counterpart in the northern climes of the distant reaches of northern Michigan, the Jedi pirate captain, acting captain, Alex Terry, USS Septarian. Alex, how are you this fine sunny Sunday here in Michigan?
Oh, I am doing great. I love it. It is so sunny out. We have a tropical heat wave. It's about 22 degrees.
It's talking a heat wave. And speaking of people who are experiencing non-tropical heat waves, we have a guest this week. Now, this gentleman will be familiar to listeners of Secret Friends Unite because he joined Todd Oxtra and I recently over on that program. Author and renowned Trekker, Mr. Christopher Abbott. Christopher, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's
good. Well, yeah, thank you for joining us over on the Trek side. As is customary, whenever we have a guest, we'd love to hear a little bit about kind of your background. Like when it's Todd and I, we say, oh, give us your geek resume. But in this case, because we're talking about Star Trek, I want to hear about your Star Trek background before we get rolling. So tell me about you and Star Trek.
Yeah, well, I'm an author of a number of works, and I'm also a feature writer for a few different organizations in Star Trek, one of them being Screen Rant. And I do quite a lot of analysis of episodes, but not in a way that would be, they're more like a story-based feature rather than a breakdown of the episode itself. You know, some of these stories can be like broken down point by point, but I don't do that. I tend to write stories more than anything else. Yeah. So, yeah, and I have a number of my own works. I'm a cross-genre author, so I tend to write things from the murder mystery to science fiction to horror to pretty much everything, really.
Damn, I love it. So how did you find yourself being a lover of Star Trek when you were a youngin'?
Yeah, I was introduced to Star Trek pretty early on. My father was a big fan of Star Trek, so I tend to get involved in that. And I found myself in a situation where he was watching these shows and I was watching them with him. And then, but I think really my love of Star Trek developed in the 80s when The Next Generation came along. I'd watched some of the films, of course, by then, but The Next Generation was the key to get into it. So, yeah, and then from there, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, of course, and so on. But my ultimate favorite show is Deep Space Nine. It always
I hear you. You know what?
Yes.
That makes three of us. You know, I've said in the past that while my background in it is very similar to yours, Chris, I watched a lot of Star Trek with my dad, and I watched it with like one of my mom was a fan, but one of her brothers was also a big fan. But for me, you know, I grew up in the 1980s, so it was Star Trek. I think 3 and 4 were my first big movie experiences. But it was, you know, a year after 4 came out that we got TNG, and I was, you know, just entering junior high. I was 11 years old, and so I was really gobbled up by that. But it was a few years later that we ended up getting Deep Space Nine. So I like to say, and that the way that evolved, I'd like to say that TNG was my real bedrock introduction, but DS9 is without a doubt the superior series. You know what I mean? With characters and stories and things like that. But we are not here today explicitly to talk about television programs. This is our first foray into discussing a Star Trek comic. So we have chosen, the three of us kind of together, a comic which is available on the Comixology Unlimited service, which is a service that I use not only to read things like this, but also to really just get all of my comics. A lifelong comic reader. I've transitioned entirely from print comics to digital comics. I only read comics on my iPad these days, and the print comics I give them away because I get them from Midtown Comics, and they're $2 an issue, and so they have almost no value. So I give them away. I've sold some of my older print comics because that's just not how I consume them. So regardless, Comixology Unlimited, I'm not trying to make this big advertisement for them, but the comic that we chose is the Q Conflict. This is a recent one. I didn't date this, but I'm going to guess this is probably from within the last 4 to 5 years. If I was to hazard a guess, I mean, one of us can look it up, but why bother? But this was, it's in a lot of ways kind of an established tradition, using the character of Q, who has crossed over from 3 different series, starting obviously in TNG. A single very noteworthy appearance in the first season of Deep Space Nine, which Alex and I talked about just last week, the famous sock 'em in the nose, Cisco versus Q, which was just glorious, good stuff. And then becoming a recurring character on Voyager, starting in season 2. But this is something that if you follow the prose novels following Q's first appearance in the beginning of TNG, he had a habit of bringing together characters from alternate aspects of TNG, and bringing together characters from, across the different genres. So this is kind of the latest attempt. This is under the IDW Comic Bear banner. They have had the Star Trek license for, I'm going to say, maybe 15 years. It was the Star Trek comic license was with Gold Key Comics very famously in the 60s, transitioned in the late 1970s to being under Marvel Comics, post Star Trek The Motion Picture, transitioned almost immediately to being with DC Comics for Star Trek 2. They held the license they published for maybe 3 or 4 years. It stopped and restarted in 1989 post Star Trek 5, and that's when I started following that comic. I loved it. I loved the TNG or the TOS movie era. That's my preferred TOS. So I followed. That was the only DC comic series I followed every single issue. I didn't have a subscription, but I went and picked it up at my local comic store, and I had every issue and loved those stories. So. But unfortunately, and this is where I'm going to let you two gentlemen do a little bit more of the driving for this. After, when IDW took over the license, they haven't had a ton of stories that have really blown my skirt up. And I hate to say this is really not another one of them. So, Alex and Chris, you guys, between you, feel free to go ahead and get started and tell us about the story, and I will punctuate as I feel very passionately. So you guys, you go ahead. Who's going first?
Well, I'll start it out. The Enterprise E crew is investigating an unusually high number of local supernova, 8 within 2 days, and is preparing to evacuate Cestus 3 before its sun explodes. They're running all over. Geordi's running sensors. Data's running data. They can't figure out what's going on. What is causing all this? And it's actually referenced in there that there's maybe 12 in the Milky Way in a decade, and they've had 8 in 2 days. So they are just losing their mind. All of a sudden, Q appears and explains that every few thousand eons, other advanced races challenged Q continuing for supremacy of the universe, and you know how the continuum, they got to smack them down. So that's kind of the premise of the first volume of this, the getting us into the story. Chris, what did you think about it?
I thought it was very good in the sense that it brought all the crews together and got them working independently from each other, rather than sticking with the crew of the Enterprise 1701 and the crew of the Enterprise E as their one team. It was all that each character was kind of split up and moved apart, which gave the writers a little bit more scope to look at some of these characters' interactions with people that they wouldn't necessarily or normally be interacting with. As a story, I liked it. I did think it was a little convoluted. With so many characters, of course, you can't help but get a bit confused about what's going on. But overall, I actually enjoyed the premise of the story. If not, I felt that it was because the original series had a much bigger scope for creating these aliens that were all like godlike. And Next Generation has been very, or I should say, all Next Generation, Deep Space Nine and Voyager episodes didn't have those godlike beings centered in science rather than this whimsically, other than Q, of course. But the bringing back those characters from the original series and putting them in with these newer ones, it worked. It definitely worked. I just felt that in some instances, and I don't want to say bad things about the original series, but in some instances, some of those characters that were created in the 60s don't always translate well to now, or at least to the
right.
now.
I agree with you.
Yeah, a little bit more ridiculous when you look at, the Metron versus Aelborn of the Organians, which are the Organians was Errand of Mercy was a season 1 episode, and it introduced us to the Klingons. It gave us the, painted brown with the Fu Manchu mustache, and basically how would you even describe that outfit? It's like a onesie overall. How would you describe the original Klingon outfit? It's really bizarre. I would say, in essence, before we move on and talk a little bit more in the story, is that it's a great concept. Anytime that you can create something, and again, it's got to feel like a lot of the previous Q novels. And again, every Q novel, and again, we've talked about this many times, all non-screen based. And Chris, feel free to jump if I'm wrong about this, but as someone who's more experienced, please jump in. It's always been understood to me that everything that is non-screen based in Star Trek is considered to be a Legends or non-canon source. So it's just it's an extra tale.
Go.
Yeah. No. I don't want to break up your whatever little nugget you were going to toss. So please, by all means.
I was going to say we don't need no stinking canon. Right. With this, story, when the story's good, you can take it with a grain of salt. You can be like, okay, this is legend. And that is something that I'm personally coming to terms with, especially with the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. Extensively. Yes.
Oh, yeah. And I was like, I can't get into it. It's not canon. It's legend. And I'm getting to this point where, and I think this comic actually broke it for me. I was like, all right, I got into it. Like Chris said, so many characters coming in because, Q beams them to this, like this courtyard, and you're meeting the other entities. And he's like, well, let me propose this. In true Q fashion, he wants to make it a little adventurous. So let's get the players. We're going to play a game. So you get the Q whop, and all of a sudden you've got Picard and his crew. You've got Cisco and his crew from DS9. You've got Captain Janeway and her crew. And then what I thought was funny was, bam, and you see the crew from TOS walking up, and they're in this line. They look like they're going to drop the sickest album of the 21st century. And I kind of want to touch on something Chris said. You're bringing characters from the 60s into the more current Trek. And I kind of chuckled at one point because, they're on Kirk's Enterprise, and at one point they're firing weapons, and they're like, our weapons have no effect on this. Yeah. So I thought that was funny, and you hit a nail right on the head there. But I think they did a good job of bringing it back, because even though that technology compared to the newer technology on the newer ships, they still had that James T. Kirkish vibe where, that beautiful double fist punch is going to knock somebody out instead of a phaser,
Well, I think what they did really well is, of course, you take these characters who are in their universe and their time frame, supreme, and the leaders of the Federation, in the sense that they are the people out on the fringe learning all the new stuff, and then you put them in 100, 200 years into the future, whatever the time frame was. They're obviously going to be entirely out of their element, because their universe is, or at least their galaxy in a sense, is much smaller than those of the Next Generation and Voyager. Space travel is fast. It's faster for them. The technology has improved. And then you have three groups of people, all from the same time period, whether it be a couple of decades different between Voyager and, say, the Enterprise E crew, because there was a slight difference in the time there. But nevertheless, they're all from that same period, and they all have the same technology. So Kirk and his crew are all automatically on a down foot in that regard. But the essence of who they are and those characters and the intelligence of those characters is still important to the story and still important to those teams. And what made it good was that we didn't, as I said before, we didn't have these groups individually working together as their own crew. They were split up amongst them. So Spock, Scotty, McCoy, they were all amongst other crew members, learning from them. I mean, arguably, when it comes to some of the more technical knowledge, some of the more detailed stuff, you've got the Spock character, which is still going to be highly intelligent. You've got Seven of Nine, who has retained apparently nearly everything that the Borg ever did. So you've also got Dax, who is from that period of time, or at least the symbiont. And I thought that they did a good job of meshing the crews together. And
they did.
In that sense that if Kirk and his crew were not able to technologically make a difference, they were able to make a difference just because they're still, intelligent and careful and a good crew that can manage a situation regardless of whether they're technologically outmatched or not.
Oh, I agree 100%, especially where you touched on the symbiont in Jadzia. That was awesome. Another one, I thought it was cool is they switched it up. Like, you had Riker on Janeway's crew. So it gave the story an option for a new dynamic, because you could, after watching TNG for all these years, you know how Riker's going to respond to Picard. But seeing him with Janeway, it was pretty cool. So, the first contest that Q puts on them is a race to recover the Iconian Gateway technology from a world where the Gateway engine is malfunctioning. So the 4 starships with mismatched crews find the portal nexus prohibits transporter use, so they use shuttles to reach the service. This is where I kind of had Charlie's got to love this part, because Riker's on Janeway's shuttle, and Picard's like, in his shuttle gunning for this, and Riker uses the prefix code for the Enterprise's shuttlecraft to shut it down. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And Jean-Luc's like, well played. But it's really cool. So there was a plethora of air quotes monsters and random appearances of portals. If they step through, they're kind of in that area. So to sum up this first challenge, Janeway's team scores the victory by recovering the Gateway engine. Their prize is they get to keep the device, but they must figure out how to use it.
And I think that makes sense, because Janeway is a scientist. I mean, she was a scientist before she was a starship captain, and so it made sense that challenge, that she would win that challenge, and also that she would get some technology that she would be able to work as a scientist to understand, rather than a captain and get their crew to figure it out. So I like that, and I thought that first they did it right. The writers got that right, that it would be Janeway that would succeed at that.
So I agree with you on that one, Charlie. What do you? You've been kind of quiet, man. You there, Charlie? Charlie? Okay. So before the next task, Q grants everyone a short break. So the warring entities are griping about Q revealing they don't trust him to honor his terms of the proxy war should he lose, which we all kind of agree, Q is that way. He's always changing stuff at the last minute.
Yeah.
So for this next one, it's pretty cool. It's capture the flag. With Kirk and Janeway paired against Sisko and Picard. The game quickly becomes intensely boring without weapons. So he throws a wild card into the mix. Do you remember the Planet Killer from the original series?
Yeah, the ice cone.
Yeah, so that gets brought in. That was pretty cool. I was kind of having and as you know, the story goes on, they're bringing these iconic villains and iconic scenarios into the story, kind of and enveloping it in, and it was pretty sweet. So the Enterprise E manages to destroy the Planet Killer. Q claims victory as his team default the killing blow. What was your thoughts on the second challenge?
Quick sidebar. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank God, my stupid headphone thingy has the dangler has a mute like a switch cord. So I bumped. Oh my God, it's terrible. Yeah, you guys, please continue. I'm gonna kind of save my thoughts for the end, especially since and you guys are doing great. So I'm going to save my thoughts to the end. I may go back on mute here for a moment, but at least I'm able to control it. So please go ahead.
What I liked about this challenge was that, again, we had a different winner. It was a different reason for the win, and in this instance, it was the most advanced starship in the fleet with its quantum torpedoes was able to take out the creature, which of course, none of the others would have succeeded at doing. Well, maybe the Defiant. I think the Defiant has quantum torpedoes, but I'm not sure at that point. But nevertheless, this is the most advanced starship in this group, with the most advanced technology. So I thought that made sense. That because of the original series, they were able to disable the Planet Killer. So so that there is ways of doing it, but it made sense that the Enterprise E crew would be able to disable it from a technological standpoint. So I thought that was the right way they went with that.
Oh yeah, totally. It's and it was just cool to see. Obviously they're using the tracker beams to do this capture the flag, but in true Q form, he scores the win for not who got the flag, but who takes down the planet destroyer. And that's just Q in a nutshell. But after this, there's a break in the action, and we kind of get to see Picard's and my thoughts, his secret weapon, and Guinan. Yeah. And Guinan's been there all through TNG, and if there's anyone that Picard goes to for counsel, it's her. She's timeless. She's wise. So Guinan can't predict anything. Q is scared and unhinged because this kind of isn't going his way at this point. But they suspect that he had started the war himself as a preemptive strike for power. So this next challenge that Q lays down is to gain the attention of the Prophets. And the Prophets had already refused to participate in Q's games. But to gain their attention, this is so cool, and this is where it really brought it in, and I really started getting in on this because DS9 is my jam. But it takes us into DS9 territory with the wormhole and the Prophets on the other side of the wormhole. And like you had said with Janeway, with her background in science, she won that first task with that engine. I kind of like the way this was going because we have Major Kira, and she gets access to the Orbs of Wisdom from the Bajoran religion with the Prophets. So they don't make contact, but Dax suggest flying the Enterprise 1701 inside the wormhole, and Kirk finds himself surrounded by the Prophets wearing familiar faces.
That part, if I might jump in, I liked very much. I liked very much. I thought that it was a nice plug, being that how we know that's how they choose to communicate, seeing things from Kirk. Boy, anytime I see Kirk in any kind of Edith Keeler reference, the one great love of his life, that really stings. Really stings. So yeah.
I thought also that it was very much a throwback and a thumbs up to the original way in which they met the prophets, which was Dax.
Yes.
And Cisco into the wormhole, and essentially Cisco finding himself in the same position. So Dax using the knowledge that she already had about how they could contact them. That was important to the story, but it also gave Kirk the ability to have his moment to shine in a task situation where, like you say, technologically he might be outgunned and so on. But this is and it was nice because we got to see a different animal. You know, Kirk is very different from Cisco, and how they would interact and how the prophets would see Kirk and so on. So I thought it was well done.
Oh, it was. And what I really dug is we got to see what happens when you piss the prophets off.
You're right. It shook them to their core, because even Q with his bluster, I think everybody but him seems to understand that you don't want to, that's not a hill you want to die on. You don't want to poke that bear. They're too powerful.
So at this point we have the pop-up. Q2 pops up and berates him for nearly melting the entire galaxy.
Corbin Burnson is like an episode of LA Law.
Oh yeah. By provoking the prophets, who have unequaled mastery over space and time. Amanda and Wesley had showed up. Amanda convinced the prophets to return everything to normal and wipe the crew's memory of the horrific destruction. Which, that kind of eliminates a whole boatload of PTSD.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that challenge goes to Kirk and his Enterprise. So the next challenge is adding the Borg Queen to Turlane's menagerie of exotic creatures, and I was like, oh shit, it's gonna get real. So the crews protest because we all know the history between the crews and the Borg. Not to sidebar, but Next Generation, the Borg were scary, and then you get like in Voyager, and the Borg weren't as scary. But I digress. Anyways, so they have to go on, and Q gets them to the area to where they can find the cube, or the cube.
The
Borg cube.
Yeah, right.
The Borg cube. So anyways, as this is going on, Guinan seeks out more allies against Q. Janeway's team learns how to operate their Iconian gateway. Picard, Sisto, and Janeway's crew engage the Borg Queen's ship. The two teams beam aboard while Kirk finds his technology useless against the collective, like we were saying, the 60s technology. And it was so awesome. In true James T. Kirk fashion, blows the shuttlecraft Galileo right through the side of the Borg cube into the hallway.
Yeah, I really like that.
Ouch!
I'm sorry to jump in, but I really like the idea that Kirk had no idea how to defeat this kind of enemy. I mean, this enemy is so outside of his area of any kind of experience that he may have had. And from listening to his crew and obviously all the interactions of the different crews. And so what does he do? Him and Worf just do what Worf and him would do. Let's just fly a shuttle in and smash through the damn thing. And I thought that was perfect. And it was perfect that it was him, the two of them as well. It was great.
Oh, yeah. And when that was happening, I was just picturing Worf screaming ramming speed. But
yeah, right.
So anyways, goodness, I lost my flow there. So Kirk finds his technology useless, blows to the side. The Queen's 7 of 9 follows the Queen's siren call and runs into Wesley Crusher and the Traveler.
That I liked.
That was cool.
Way to go, Wesley.
Yeah, they captured the Queen, but are surrounded by drones. They're saved when Kirk and Worf ram through the shuttle hull. They escape safely through Janeway's gateway, and Amanda, Wesley, and the Traveler bring their powers to covertly aid Q in fighting the Q. So that was who Guinan was, seeking out through all of this.
I think it's important to remember that even Q said to his son, how many times have we had to tell you, don't provoke the Borg?
Yes.
The reality there, of course, is that, this infestation that's probably how the Q sees the Borg, as an infestation. But at some point, they're going to get to a point where they can challenge the Q, or at least discover a way of getting to the Q. And having the Borg Queen in this was really good, because it wasn't just some errant drone or a load of drones. It was the epitome of the entire collective, the queen of the collective, with all the resources and knowledge therein. So I thought that was pretty ballsy of the character to add. I think it was Trelane to add the Borg Queen into the mix, and probably very scary for everyone else. As you said, that the Borg were pretty scary in past. I mean, Voyager's continuous interactions with the Borg lessened that somewhat, but the Queen, I think, the Borg Queen was always scary.
Right, totally. And, it's interesting, Q and Trelane, there was a whole novel dedicated to that in the 90s. And again, all those novels blur in my mind. It's like Q this, it's called Q dash something, or Q this and that. And that novel, and again, Star Trek embraces this theory that it's kind of like Marvel Comics has really popularized the concept of a multiverse. Like, there are a million different stories, and you think about Endgame, and we've got to go back and find the stones, but we've got to go to these 6 different time periods, and each one of them is a different alternate reality, and it can't be changed, and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of the same thing with this, where in this novel that I'm thinking of, Q and Trelane is a Q, and the two of them are in conflict, and they end up having to split up these different alternative realities of TNG. So one of them is, Tasha Yar never died. One of them is it's the timeline from yesterday's Enterprise, where Tasha Yar never died in that regard. And one of them was Riker was a prisoner of war, and they finally recovered him. So they just do all these kind of different things. But to me, it felt like this story was more kind of interlocked. The two of them were the main protagonists against each other, where you had, the Metreon, Aelborn, I mean, they were powerful, but there was never anything else about them. It almost feels like there was never any fanfic or basically non-canonical material, no comic, no whatever, where you really felt there was much of a push that you saw those characters come back, where Trelane seemed to pop up quite a bit. I know he popped up in that DC Comics Volume 2 that I followed so closely when I was in high school. I know that he had an issue with that, and that series was very good for revisiting basically plot lines from the original series and giving them an update, so kind of everybody got a sequel. But we never saw the Metron or Aelborn or the Organians ever again. But you did see Trelane, because Trelane was just more interesting. He was, he was a goof. He was like Q.
Yeah, they have a longevity that you would want to investigate further. Some of these characters were one and dones in the show. They move on, and then we don't have to think about them again. And honestly, they might be an interesting episode, but the sort of dynamics of that character might not necessarily work if you advance their story further. I mean, yes, in books, of course, you can do whatever you want, but I feel in Star Trek, when Q first appeared, it was obvious that they designed him as a reoccurring kind of villain for the new Star Trek series.
Right.
And in my mind, the Q that we eventually got to see, and no disrespect to John Delancey, because I think he is awesome, but the Q that we saw in Voyager was much more of a trickster than what he was sort of planning or attempted to do with the Next Generation crew. I mean, his view was that he was putting humanity on trial, and we got that beginning and end in the Next Generation of first episode of the last episode, where you're on trial and we're trying to show you that there's more, that there's more to your existence than what you believe, and there was always sort of an end game to that. But with Q on Voyager, it was almost a bit of a trickster type. I'm just going to come in and annoy you for a little bit and then disappear. And I didn't feel like that they really used Q in a way that was successful in Voyager. Specifically, he can click his fingers and chuck the Enterprise, 15,000 light years to have their first encounter with the Borg. But he can't get Voyager home. I mean,
right, exactly.
He won't because I can't do all the work for you. Like the reasons behind his actions. It would have been much better if Q said, "I could send you home. I'm just not gonna do it."
Right. To keep that trickster god bit of it. So yeah, exactly. So you can't imagine why the Voyager crew would interact with him at all. It's like, well, why don't you get us home, and then whatever it is that you want, maybe we'll talk about it. Exactly. So you're right. It did really seem like a waste in a lot of ways. It would seem like it would have been useless to have him in the series at all because he didn't really live up to his potential.
I think in this comic, I think that they've got the Q we had originally, which is in a sense a bored, omnipotent being, but also with a sort of a slight end game to the reasons why he's doing it. Like it's suggested that he created this war in an effort to kind of subvert the gods and precipitate over whatever might occur at the end. There seems to be a plan, if you like.
Right, exactly. So, well, cool. Alex, you were poised to speak, and I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead, please.
Oh, no, I was just going to roll it forward from where we were at.
Yes, please.
So Wesley, Traveler brings Wesley and Amanda. Amanda provides Q weaponry and advises using the weapon's only powers to disguise them from the gods as a more primitive non-Q device. So in the comic, they kind of portrayed it. To me, it just looked like a little stick, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to see Cisco, Wingardium Leviosa, and hit him with that. But it was pretty cool because in the next panel, you start seeing like the full-size phaser rifles and everything materializing from these Q weapons. So they want to keep it to more primitive to catch them off guard. Wesley and the Traveler help stabilize the gateway, allowing the combined well-armed crews to storm Q's garden. Q creates caught him off guard. Q lazily creates feral creatures to defend against the Starfleet attack. Terrain leads a Napoleonic charge. But they quickly find their beasts are no match against the Q weapons. It was pretty cool. They're sitting there. Chakotay had a mortar, and he fired that, and he was catching them off guard with that. So Q is like just losing his cool. He's grasping at straws. He's just, summoning everything he can think of. Borg, bluegill, neutral parasites, Jem'Hadar, Breen, Kalar copies, all to fight him. So when the Starfleet crews are defending and distracting Q's army, their secret weapon readies the endgame. Because we all are big DS9 fans, and what was special about Dr. Bajor?
He was genetically enhanced. He was good con.
Yeah. So he takes he has a sniper rifle, aims a sniper rifle, and it's funny in the comics, it's got like the looking through the scope with the crosshairs, and it's got it right on his eye. And he fires, and it glances. It cuts his cheek. Q is just doesn't know what to do. Summons the Terrorsians, but stopped by Q2, convinces them to end the madness. A truce is declared. Q promises to leave the other god factions alone if they will do the same for the Continuum. As part of the term, Starfleet crews surrender their extra-dimensional weaponry. Gateway and Amanda and Wesley renounce their powers, which I thought... Yeah.
Stakes. I liked the stakes of that, even though you're thinking about the fact that obviously, and again I'll throw the canonical argument in there, but again you have two characters that have not appeared canonically at all since TNG, even though Wesley had a deleted scene in Star Trek Nemesis where you saw him at Riker and Troy's wedding. He says that he's an engineer on the Titan, and he makes some offhand comment about blah blah blah. But as stated, you live by the rules, die by the rules. Since it didn't appear on screen, it's not canon. So Wesley is therefore inferred to still be elsewhere. Well, again, like you said, good story. Take it as you will. You consider this an alternate dimension. And again, I'll finish when you're done here. I'll tell you the one thing that really took me out of the story, that drove me insane, that made it that actually falls right back in with the alternate dimension part that drove me nuts. But anyway, to make my point, it's cool to see that this story wasn't just like, oh, at the end of it, it was like, the last episode of TNG, All Good Things, where Q waved his hand and it was only Picard that knew what happened. And there were no stakes because everything was just back the way it was. Well, no, everything wasn't back the way it was because, as it says in this last paragraph, Q grants all the proxies the choice of retaining their memories of the encounter, or, as you said, or remembering, and then obviously Wesley and Amanda get put back. He admits that the war was a chance for excitement and is otherwise banal omnipotence, and advises Picard himself to seize opportunities for excitement in the future. Very interesting.
It is. I mean, I didn't really think that ending, in the sense that giving them the choice to retain their memories. I mean, you're putting the 1701 crew back in the 23rd century with all the knowledge of the future in that respect didn't seem, giving them the choice to retain that information when they go back. I didn't think that was, for me personally, I thought it should be.
It didn't really add up. Yeah.
It should be put back. I mean, there's always been the case. I mean, I know that people don't like it. It happens in Doctor Who, and the doctors meet each other and they say, oh, the timelines are out of sync. You can't retain the knowledge. You won't remember any of this, blah, blah, blah. But I think that that's an important aspect to remember, that, because obviously the Voyager crew are stuck in the Delta Quadrant, and if these people reference that, they can change that and stop them from going to the Badlands, and so on and so on and so on.
Right, exactly.
I did like that. One thing I did like about that, just jumping back briefly to when O'Brien talks to Bashir about why he missed. Yeah. And of course he says that he wants Q to kind of be reminded of his own mortality. That I thought was interesting because it was very much in character of both Bashir and O'Brien, because there's been a number of episodes where they were together, and where O'Brien is like, kill the bloody thing, and Bashir's like, no, that's not the way we do things, that's not the way Starfleet works. And O'Brien has a lot more of a black and white view of things than O'Brien did. Bashir did, which I thought was good, and they kept that in this sequence, because had it been O'Brien with that weapon, he would have shot Q in the eye. I mean, right in the end of it.
Totally.
He had a warrior. He fought in the Battle of Settlers 3. He killed Cardassians. He is an engineer, but at the end of the day, he's been in wars. Bashir, on the other hand, is a doctor, and
do no harm.
Has that mentality, and also it's very Star Trek. That we don't shoot someone in the head, even if they're a baddie. We try and find another solution. So I liked that.
Right. No, I agree. Okay, so before we get to final ratings, I'm gonna tell you the one thing that ruined this for me, and it's a thing that's probably so uniquely me. And again, Alex and I, we've been doing this podcast for Alex. We've been doing this for 5 months now, And Alex and I, funny story, we've not met in real life, even though we live in the same state. We met each other through the Star Trek International Fan Club. I have helped Alex get his fan club chapter off the ground, and he's rapidly eclipsing my own chapter as far as great activities and wonderful stuff you guys are doing, and I'm very proud of him as his sponsor. But he's gotten to know the fact that I'm a Star Trek cosplayer. And something that is phenomenally, like, in my core is accuracy when it comes to Starfleet uniforms. And I have to tell you that I know that this series came out maybe a year or so ago, and I grabbed the first issue in print when I was still spending time going to my local comic shop. And I started reading this, and right from the jump, I'm like, okay, this is set in the post First Contact time period. They're wearing the First Contact / DS9 uniforms, which is, of course, the jacket with the gray quilted shoulders, and with the division color being the undershirt, and it zips. It's a zip up from belly to neck. It's a straight zip up, and the rank pips are in the same spot. Immediately, you have Worf wearing a gold uniform in that style, which he never did, ever.
No, because he wore the gold uniform first, as in the normal TNG uniform that came off of Next Generation, and he went to the gray. He went to the red jumpsuit right away.
DS9 original, exactly. So and he never switched back. From there, I watched, and I don't know who was the continuity person for this, but you saw a hybrid of the DS9, we'll call it version 1. You saw it, basically it looks like somebody miscolored it, because you saw that the gray turtleneck underneath was a zip up the middle, which it was a zip up the back. You saw rank pips were done incorrectly. O'Brien went from being a chief to being a lieutenant to being a chief again.
Yep.
You saw that Dr. Bashir went from being a lieutenant to being a full commander to being a lieutenant again. I couldn't fucking handle it. It was driving me out of my goddamn mind.
I knew it.
I'm a customer, and some place where I'll come to loggerheads with others is when they're like, I love my uniform. They've got a bright, shiny comm badge. They've got bright, shiny pips that aren't on a board, so they're all they aren't in a row, and they're wearing black boots with laces and buckles and zippers, and I'm like, I can't. I'm a snob for uniforms. I can't help it. It's my thing. It's always been my thing. You look at my uniform closet downstairs, because that's where I have my Starfleet uniforms. I would hold them up against absolutely anyone. If I get something that looks like shit, I will send it back. I will absolutely, that's one place where I'm very Borg-like in my perfection. So that made it very difficult for me to maybe appreciate the story as much as you guys did, because it felt, even though this was an alt-universe take, why does it have to be an alt-universe take on the fact that the uniforms are all fucked up? It was driving me insane.
Well, it would make sense if it was, for example, if you remember Parallels, when Worf was switching between all these different parallel worlds, and everybody was changing their uniforms, and because everyone was in a position where that was different in each parallel universe. The only thing I would say about this series was, I think it's 6 issues, something like that.
Yeah, I believe so.
It had like 5 or 6 different artists.
Yes.
And 3 editors. So I'm thinking continuity was an issue, because you're absolutely right. I mean, it irks me when I see the uniforms incorrect. I mean, for example, and I know this is jumping a little bit out of the topic, but when they brought back Data in Picard, and I'm not talking about the They did a good job. They put him in the right uniform, the one he died in, and so on. But when that last episode, when they're sitting there talking, there was one thing that really, really annoyed me, and it was like such a small, minor thing. And it was when he was talking, they did a close-up of his face, and you saw the zip hanging off the front of the tunic.
Such a no-no.
And even everybody knows that Gene Roddenberry's original idea was that there were no zippers in the 24th in the future.
Right,
and so
exactly.
They had to be hidden and so on. But the reality is that even if you go back to watch any of the original shows, you never ever see these big, long, dangly zippers. And so to my mind, it was almost like that they'd got this uniform perhaps from some set that they used it on, or I don't know. But it just that was wrong, and I felt like, come on, that was a simple thing that you could have fixed.
Well, I mean, even in this day and age, it's something that they could remove digitally, which they couldn't do in the old days. Yeah. It's the same thing. I just acquired, and I did a couple of photos recently. The customer that we use, we buy through a vendor on eBay. Bexagen is their name. Obviously, it's Chinese, but the maker is a company called Kazermart, which some of them ship domestically, some of them ship overseas. Their latest creation is they made they have that First Contact jacket with swap out sleeves. Swap out cuffs. So it comes when I bought the jacket. It came with 3 sets of cuffs with the 3 department colors, and I then turned around and got the three undershirts. And you guys, quick pause. There's some kind of breathing or something noise in the background. If you guys could just mute for a sec while I finish this, and we'll circle back, if that's cool. Okay, very good. So what it looked like is that there were, and I bought the 3 undershirts, but I had my wife just take a couple of snaps of me in the uniform, so it was the same thing. When I would zip it up, I would say, all right, is the zipper tucked into the neck? Because even though she was just taking a snap on my phone, I was not going to have that costuming area that Christopher that you're talking about, because it's repugnant to me. I can't stand it. So anyway, my rant is over. That detracted from my enjoyment of this, but overall, as a story, I would still give it, maybe if I was to give it a 1 to 10 rating, it's probably, as far as level of enjoyment, I would say it was like a 7.5 for me. It was a cool story. I thought about it like Endgame, like one of the Avengers stories, where there were stakes, but there weren't stakes. But at the end of it, there were some really cool surprises. So yeah, all right. So that's it. Back to you guys for your ratings. Chris, what was your 1 out of 10 for this?
I think for me, it was a 6, only because I enjoyed it right up until the end, where it just got crazy with Hugh chucking in so many different characters, and it just, I don't know. I just found like by the end, it was almost like they were trying too hard to come up with an end solution. Like they worried that and I know as a writer that they worried that their final ending for it was weak, or was not as strong as their beginning, so they tried to beef it up with a massive amount of action. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I felt that just overwhelmed it a little bit. So I think for enjoyment, I would give it a 6 out of 10.
All right, Alex, take us home. What is your evaluation?
I would give it a 7.5 from the Russian judge. So, like you said, like both of you said, there are some continuity issues in this. It's one of those, and I noticed it about issue 2 is where I started. I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I have to immerse myself in the story. I cannot pay attention to the finicky, like the small stuff. Like we sit back and we watch it, like, any of the seasons, or we sit back and we read it, and there's stuff that just isn't right. And then it's kind of like, you sit there and you're focusing on it because it's not right. And this is something, a genre we love so much. But so if you go into this story, immerse yourself. Don't catch the fine details. Let that slide. If the continuity wouldn't have been an issue as much as it was, I would have probably given it an 8.5. It was really cool. I thought once I got immersed in there, my favorite, I laughed at the end because Picard had like a what the fuck moment. He's like, what the fuck? Without him saying it, because he's like, this is what we were trying to do to start with, and here we are. Yeah, right. And it kind of goes like into what Chris was saying. It kind of a weak ending. The thing that kind of threw me a curveball. Well, first off, the thing that I thought was really cool, they brought in the Planet Destroyer from the original series. They brought in the Prophets from DS9. They brought in the Borg from TNG and Voyager. So you had an element. They also referenced a menagerie. There was all these iconic events and creatures from the series, and it kind of to tie it in. One thing that let me down was when they were on the Borg cube. Here, I said it right that time. Because traditionally the Borg have been the big bad, and it was kind of like, it was so quick on the Borg cube. It was just so fast. Like, I kind of lost it, because like traditionally, it would have been an ass kicking fight in there,
Yeah, right.
It was kind of detracted from it, Kirk and Worf blowing the shuttlecraft through the wall of the cube. That kind of detracted from it, but being a Trekkie, you're like, wow, that went a little too easy for the Borg. But
and I think it's a symptom. I think it's a symptom of how the Borg have been treated since Voyager. And whilst I did like the view of it in the new Picard series, and how they were a little bit more sort of, they were scared of them, and they even in their state where they were in, like, there was a reason to be fearful of them.
Right.
I do feel that you're right. I think when we first saw that first cube and they did the first damage to it, and then they watched it slowly repair itself. I mean, that's kind of terrifying, you know, that you think that everything that they hit it with caused a superficial amount of damage, and then it slowly repaired itself. And then suddenly they were firing on it, and oh, by the way, no damage at all now. And then casually this thing grabs it with the tractor beam and starts cutting great sections of the ship off without any thought to what might happen. And so that's the terrifying aspect of it. Like I said before, I think Voyager did a good job with the Borg Queen, because the Borg Queen is a really interesting character, and I'm glad that we got to see a little more of her and what her capabilities are in that respect. And of course, we can't hide the fact that there are some horrific scenes in Voyager with the Borg, especially in Dark Frontier, where you see all the Borg heads with the brains exposed and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
that's very visceral. That's kind of what
they changed it from this sort of well, there was always space zombies, but I felt like that, like you said, Alex, that they had just, I don't want to say dumbed it down, but they definitely took away some of the menacing fear of that. Do you remember the first contact scene where they're walking down the corridor and Data's telling Picard about, you know, how he's experiencing all these emotions, and Picard says, you know, as fun as that is, I'd really like you to just shut up now, you know.
Yeah.
Get round the corner and they first see the Borg, they all jump. I mean, the reaction of them is incredible. And then when they start coming and they're shooting them, and then Worf says they've adapted, it's just like you get that sense of just how they just keep coming until they don't get knocked down anymore. And I didn't feel like we got that in Voyager at all. I felt like that they could just 18 cubes, okay, well, let's see how many we can take out before they take us out. Really?
Yeah, right.
No.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So I think that's a symptom, and I think in this instance, in this comic, I felt like that symptom was there, because you know, the Borg, one Borg cube should be enough to destroy an entire solar system.
Well,
without any issue.
And wiping out, 39 Starfleet vessels at Wolf 359 without, without even working up a dander. Exactly. So, well, cool. Well, guys, this was great. And so I'll wrap up this section of it, and let's move on to talking about. I just have the one news story this week, but we've touched on this before. Picard was set to get back into production. It was going to be in January, then it was going to be like, Feb 1st, and it looks like it's finally happening. But that's not really the historic thing that I think is amazing. And again, I shared this a couple of days ago, probably on Secret Friends, and then also on our Grand Petoskey fan page. But 2021 is a historic year for Star Trek, because we have 5 series in production during this calendar year, which is astounding. There was never more than 2. 3 being produced. I think 1994 was a year that TNG ended. DS9 was ongoing, and then Voyager was being planned and then filmed and then debuted the following January of 1995. But this blurb right here, which comes from Trek Movie, Alex knows that I never mess around with non-reputable sourcing. It's a thing for me. And again, Chris, you'll appreciate this because you are a journalist. I have been a journalist since before I was born. That's how my parents met. They were both college journalists at Central Michigan University here in Michigan. So I am born from it. I've done it my whole life. A college paper, high school paper. It was probably a junior. There was probably an elementary school paper. I'm not remembering. But Picard joined Star Trek Discovery, which has been in production on season 4 since last November. Indications are that the new series Strange New Worlds, which I just could not be more fired up about, Captain Pike is probably my strongest cosplay. He's my guy. Will begin production imminently. There were some suggestions, and I believe I talked about this in our last episode, that it could start as soon as tomorrow, February 22nd, when this episode that we're talking about will drop right now. So that's ongoing. Obviously, the pre-production has been going on long before that. In addition to these 3 live-action shows, there are 2 animated shows currently on the slate. Season 2 of Lower Decks, which Alex and I, that show is very special to us because the first episode of Lower Decks is how we kicked off this show. That was what Alex and I talked about it through the jump. We went through that show as it was airing, and we did the same with Discovery. So Lower Decks is very important to us. And then the first season of the kids program, Star Trek Prodigy, arrives this year from Nickelodeon. And as I understand it, Nickelodeon being and I hope I'm correct, being a Viacom/Paramount property, will be available on Paramount Plus, which the name changes from CBS All Access to Paramount Plus on March 4th. So yeah, this is truly in a lot of ways the year of Trek. It's the 55th anniversary of the debut of the original series on September 8th of this year, and we got 5 shows coming out. I mean, oh my God,
yeah,
and 5.
There's another one as well.
What's that? Say that again.
Michelle Yeoh's led Section 31 series, remember?
Right. No. Yeah. No. I don't know. And maybe I'm mistaken that there hasn't been a lot of news on that in a while. But yeah, obviously that's being worked on, even though it's not mentioned here. So this is amazing. I mean, Alex and I. It's funny with the show when Discovery ended. I said, well, Alex, we're gonna have to go back to doing the past season recaps, and maybe we should go bi-weekly. But then, we're like, no, we want to be on all the time. So I built a schedule for us where we're, approaching it half seasons at a time, and we're having special episodes like this one, once or twice a month. And I said, well, we'll do this until the new episodes come out, but then we're kind of biting our nails because we're like, well, when's a new anything ever going to come out? But I see this now, and it fills me with a lot of hope. So what I'm feeling personally is that probably late summer, early fall, there's going to be produced episodes of shows that we're going to see, maybe even sooner with the animated stuff, because it is from a practical standpoint, probably a lot easier to produce, in the world of COVID. So,
but I understand that a lot of these actors have been doing their voice stuff from home.
Right.
In the same way that the Big Finish people have been able to continue doing the Doctor Who stories, because most of the actors are actually doing their reading and acting their parts at home on their own.
Right.
So
exactly. Yeah. So real quick before we wrap it up, of the 5 series in production, what is the one that everybody's most anticipated for?
Ooh.
Strange New Worlds.
Yep. You know what? I'm with you. Strange New Worlds for me.
I have to say, I think I agree with you. I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing Kate Mulgrew's voice in Prodigy again.
Sure.
And I'm absolutely excited for Star Trek Picard too, because I feel like that there's going to be some good stuff in there that we haven't heard about yet. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to see some of the cast members of the Next Gen that haven't been in it already totally surfacing, although there's still no confirmation of that. But I'm convinced that we'll see Geordie and we'll see Worf and all those characters. They just have to. There's no reason not to add them now that they've done some already. But yes, the one series that I am really looking forward to, because there is no there's nothing to sort of measure it against, is Strange New Worlds. It's going to be its own series with, yes, some characters that we're aware of, obviously a very important one like Spock, but it's going to be in a situation where I believe the intention is that it will run like a TOS series, in that it will be episodic or Next Generation.
Right, exactly.
The season-long arc story thing. So
more traditional format. So yeah, awesome, very good. Well, that is our show. Alex, before you take us out here, Chris, and I keep going back and forth between Chris or Christopher. What do you prefer?
Either is fine. I don't mind.
Either is fine. Good answer. How do people find you out there in the world of media, social media, whatever? How do they find you?
The easiest way to find me would be on my website, which is cdanabbott.com. That's cdan Abbott. Or on Facebook, you can just look me up, Christopher D. Abbott.
Awesome. Good deal. All right. Well, man, thank you for joining us. This has been so great. You're our first famous guest, because our other guest was Todd Oxtra, and he's okay, but this was awesome, and we will have you back any old time. I think particularly when we get rolling with new episodes of new shows, we definitely want to have people like yourself on instead of just being just Alex and I, because we'll be, there's always different ways to look at this kind of stuff. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right.
Both of you. Thank you.
Alex, do what you do.
For more information about Starfleet International in Michigan and beyond, please visit the Graham Petoskey and or Septarian on Facebook. The Code 47 podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network and is produced by the Borg Queen, Todd Oxtra.
Well, you know what? He's got the same hairstyle. Oh, my God.
Oh!
I know it wasn't very nice. Friends, as always, thank you for joining us. We are, as Alex mentioned, part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. You can find us over on Twitter at Secret Friends U. That would be the letter U. Our shows are, of course, Code 47, the Star Trek podcast, which you're listening to right now. Secret Friends Unite is our main show where we talk about geek culture as a whole. Co-op mode is bi-weekly and talks about video games. And the Holocron Chronicles, also bi-weekly, alternating weeks, talks about Star Wars. That is myself and the Canadian Mark Carabin. We have a new singularly dedicated store over on TeePublic that has the logos for all 4 of our programs. You're able to translate that into swag of all kinds: shirts, hoodies, stickers, notebooks, throw pillows, wall art. I mean, it's just throwing the kitchen sink out. You can do all kinds of different stuff. I will tell you that if you're listening to this program the week of February 22nd, at the end of this week, they are having a sale window. They have up to 35% off on these products. The reason that I mention this is that all proceeds from this store do benefit the charity, the League of Enchantment, here in the state of Michigan, which my wife and I belong to. It's a charity cosplay group that does outreach for kids here in the state of Michigan, hospital visits and care packages and things of that nature. Jump on to the podcasting service of your choice, Apple, iTunes, Google Play, etc. Give us a 5-star rating and a review, and we are able to give you a prize from our fantastic digital prize closet. So give us a crack. Let us know what you think about that show. Hit us up on Twitter, and definitely take a look at the TeePublic store. That's it for me. Thank you again for joining us. I'm going to tell you, as always, that sharing is caring, and to keep on trekking.
Be good to one another and live long and prosper.